Hi, everybody. Welcome to Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. Nice to have you with us. I'm Matt Connerton, and with me here is New Hampshire State Rep and apparently honorable Gary Hopper.
Well, yeah, at least in title only.
I just learned this recently, the
Title only.
honorable part.
Yes,
and,
that's,
yes.
You get $100 a year, and the title honorable for the rest of your life.
And mileage occasionally, right?
Yeah, occasionally.
Occasionally
It's not,
mileage,
that's
yeah.
not that constant.
Right.
I'm going to introduce my guest in a second. I wanted to go over a couple things that happened in the news. One that I just found out about before we got here. Concord Monitor, I guess it's all over the paper. They had a hearing up at the State House over the whether or not to allow Barack Obama to be on the ballot because of his questionable citizenship.
Really?
Yeah. Okay.
I
So
didn't
anyway.
even hear about this.
Oh yeah, but that's not the funny part. The really funny. The really.
Oh, my God.
Let's see. Well, no. Let's see. Assistant Attorney General Matt Mavro-George. Matt
Is that how you say his last name?
Mavro-George. You don't have any idea?
I think it's Maverick George.
Mavro-George. Assistant Attorney Mavro-George. And remember, I think it was when did we do the show on with the vets with Al Baldessaro?
Oh, that was just a couple of weeks ago.
A couple of weeks ago. Yeah, Representative Al Baldessaro, great state rep. The Assistant Attorney General said that Al was looking at him angrily, okay, and that he didn't know what these people would do and felt threatened.
Really?
So the guy we had here, the nice guy who told us about vets,
Nice but intimidating.
apparently he's a mean son of a gun and scared the heck out of the Assistant Attorney General.
No kidding.
I feel feel so bad for him. I mean, do you have to be a sissy to be an Assistant Attorney General, or is that just
Poor Matt Marcelong.
yeah? I just
guy.
It is just so pathetic. I mean, because he's an assistant attorney general,
Right.
and his argument is he felt threatened because Al was mad at him and looked
Right.
angrily at
Right.
him.
But Al is an intimidating presence. Do you not agree?
Not really.
No? I thought he might pummel me at any moment when he
Yeah,
was,
I know.
when he was
I
here.
know you were scared, but
I was
expect-
terrified.
I expect that.
Yes, well, I'm always frightened.
Yeah.
Yes.
So anyway, that was in the news, and that was just comical. It was kind of funny, and I've never been able to find this in the paper, or I remember looking for this. There was something that I think it was one of the founding fathers said that there's a sequence of events that lead from call me Rick Perry. It's. I probably shouldn't say this because it'll destroy my political career again. What do you call what financial system we got? We have a
Capitalist system?
Capitalist. Thank you. True capitalism leads to quantities and stuff like that, which leads to gluttony, which leads to apathy, which leads to the feminization of society. And I forget, it's put much more eloquently than that, but I think that's where we are. When we have somebody who's an assistant attorney general who's intimidated because somebody stared at them,
Right.
that's sad. That's just sad. Anyway, so that was one thing. Let's see. Really good news was the last September we had Richard Olson and the director of Fish and Game, Glenn Normando, on the show. And one thing we talked about was there was a lawsuit against a landowner in Exeter
Yeah.
because somebody went out in the woods in back of his house, used a tree stand that was out there, fell down and became partially paralyzed, and was trying to sue the landowner for letting him on the land, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely.
That suit was dropped this week. He said there was misunderstanding of who was, he wasn't sure who the landowner was, and the
Right.
permission he got wasn't from them, and so he was confused.
Do we want to hold that for now?
I
or-
can take it. We can,
Oh,
unless
That's
it's
right,
not
you
for
already-
us.
you already. Yeah.
So that was awesome. That suit was dropped. but that allows us to have, we have legislation in the House that's introduced by Gene Chandler to remedy that, so we clarify the monetary situation. If you go on somebody's land right now, you're liable for whatever happens to you.
Right.
If you pay them to go on the land, like to pick apples, they're liable if something happens to you.
Okay.
So we got to clarify that little transaction so that landowners aren't put in jeopardy of being sued over silly things like in this particular case. But that's coming up in January. We'll work on that in Fish and Game Committee. That's going to be awesome. So that was one thing. Oh, and then I got spanked in the Union Leader this week.
Oh, what goes on over there?
I don't know, but I enjoyed it.
Oh, nice. Good for you, Gary.
We had a trip with the every year, I guess. I think it's every year. I could probably have this wrong, but every year the Quebec counselor or the has people come up and tour the border and stuff like that. I think they've done it from Maine. They've done it from Vermont, and they invited a bunch of people from New Hampshire, and Speaker O'Brien arranged for me and a few of the other legislators to go up. And the paper made it look like it was the state of Quebec was basically bribing us by taking us up there to go to Hydro-Quebec, which is really not even remotely true. We were supposed to go to the border, different border places and show what security was like, what they're doing now compared to what they used to do. And then we went to Hydro-Quebec for a presentation, and then we went out to eat, stayed overnight in Montreal, and then went to the Port Authority in Montreal. It was and then came back and did another tour or something else on the way back. And it was really cool. It was really kind of exciting because they didn't have very good tires, and it was during a snowstorm, so we were like skidding up.
It was an adventure.
Oh, it really was, because we were supposed to go to the border over on Route 3, but we couldn't make it because the snow was so bad.
Yeah.
And so they decided to take an alternate route. And we're going up over these hills, and you got all these legislators and their wives going back and trying to stand over the rear axle of the bus to try to get it up over these hills.
Oh, that is
like,
scary. When you have to move around the bus to...
And the tires were burning so bad it was filling up inside with rubber, and it was actually quite an embarrassment I would think, to the Canadian government. But
I would think so too.
I thought it was pretty funny.
Yeah,
because I'm kind of sadistic like that.
Sure.
But anyway, it was the people of New Hampshire should actually be proud of the New Hampshire legislature, because when we went before the gentleman at Hydro-Quebec, he really didn't have very many answers. We just pelted him with questions. What's this going to do? What's this going to do? I wanted to know what they were going to do with the undergrowth underneath the wires, because to me, the most likely cause of problems with people getting cancer along power lines was the defoliants they were using, not the electricity.
Oh, interesting.
And he said they're not even allowed to use defoliants. I asked him how much money it was going to save using DC as opposed to AC, and he didn't know. Al Baldessaro, I know, asked a bunch of questions.
Well, he probably intimidated him.
Yeah, that's probably what it was. It scared him.
Probably stared at him angrily.
He probably stared at him angrily, and the guy's still in therapy.
He was flummoxed. Didn't know what to say.
But anyway, that's all I have for me, and as far as stuff that went on this week. But now to introduce my guest, Ovid LaMontagne, who I supported for senator, and now you're running for governor, and. Usually on the show, especially if I haven't had somebody before, I usually like to get an idea of why they're running for office, what motivated them to get involved in politics in the first place. So if you could start from there.
That's a very long story, so let me try to make it as concise as possible. First of all, it's great to be with you, Matt, and the Honorable Gary Hopper.
The Honorable Gary.
Gary, so he's going to be honorable the rest of his life. And just in complete disclosure, Gary's sister works in our office, office, Ruth, and she sends her best and happy Thanksgiving to you. But I've been involved in public life in New Hampshire for over 25 years in a number of ways. And for example, in 1991, I was Senate legal counsel. I represented the New Hampshire State Senate as a body, as a lawyer. It was a great experience in terms of learning the legislative process. I've been involved in political campaigns over the years. I ran for Congress in 1992. I was the sort of the long shot conservative running against an establishment candidate at that time. And then I became chairman of the State Board of Education and oversaw for 3.5 years the delivery of educational services here in New Hampshire. In the meantime, raising a family, participating in Manchester's civic life and community life. And then when Steve Merrill decided not to seek re-election, he announced his decision in April of 1996.
Yep.
That's a very little bit of time to get organized for a campaign, because right now we're a little less than a year away now, but I announced on September 19th this year. So we're over a year away from the actual primary and election cycle. But Steve Merrill decided in April of 1996 he would not seek re-election. So I was working in his administration. I knew a lot about education, and I, at the age of 38, decided I would run for governor too, because I thought I could offer something to the people of New Hampshire. And we won that primary as a long shot candidate, and was really a very successful campaign. But it was not a good year to be a conservative in the general election. In 1996, you might recall, Bill Clinton was on the ropes, but he won in New Hampshire. He carried New Hampshire and a number of other states. Bob Dole and I get about the same number of votes. And so after the 96 election, my children were like 10 and 7, and it was time for me to spend time at home helping my daughters to become young ladies and to participate in their activities. And what's that?
You mean beating them?
No.
Yeah, Bill's character.
I mean,
exactly.
Raising my children the way most New Hampshire people do.
Oh,
And teaching them how to fish.
I was thinking of where.
Oh, right, that's right.
Yeah,
Yes, you
sorry.
were.
Yeah.
So since 1996 until last year, I participated in, again, the civic community with my family, practiced law at Divine Willamette Branch, and continued to be involved in a number of different aspects of various campaigns, as well as political policy and public policy. In 2010, when Senator Gregg announced, or 2009 actually, when he announced he would not seek re-election, I took a long, hard look at this. And because I was concerned, as a lot of Americans were, and New Hampshire people were, about the way the federal government was growing out of control. It had been for several years, but it really was on the verge of doing that with this new administration. And we only saw things get worse from the inauguration of President Obama. With the passage of Obamacare and some of the other things, I decided that I had something to offer. I'm a conservative. I believe in federalism. I believe in the Constitution, that it's a limiting document, not a living document. It's intended to be the compact between the people and their government. And it sets forth the powers the government is supposed to have, the limited powers. And for so many generations now, we have ignored the Constitution, the federal Constitution. And so I am a constitutional conservative, and I'm a lifelong conservative. So I decided to run for office, not against anyone, but to be an alternative candidate for folks to consider.
Yeah.
And you may recall that in the 2010 election cycle, probably 3 weeks from the primary, I was in single digits. And something happened in the last 3 weeks.
I endorsed you. Exactly.
I think that's what happened.
Yeah,
As soon as that went out
Wow.
in public, it went viral.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it made all the difference for us,
Viral
Gary.
is,
Thank
a
you.
lot of people use that to describe me.
Oh, my. Wow.
So-
Viral, whatever.
And we gained a lot of momentum in the final stage and came within a percentage point of winning that primary. I was very encouraged by the people's response, and since that primary, supported Kelly Ayotte to be our next United States Senator. I'm pleased that she is.
Just not, sorry to interrupt, but
Right, sure.
the quantity of money you spent coming in second compared to your other two, Ayotte and Binney.
Bill Binney.
What was the? You remember the numbers? I remember it was astronomical. but-
Yes, I do remember roughly. Bill Binney spent almost up to $8 million, and I spent $500,000. That's what I was able to raise and spend. And so the return on my investment was pretty substantial,
Wow.
obviously.
Yeah.
Kelly spent, I believe, about $3 million in the primary cycle. And so, again, I was outspent 4, 5, 8, 6 to 1 and beyond. But it proved to me, and this is why I really wanted to win as much as I wanted to win, was to also send a message to the New Hampshire people and people around the country that it isn't the amount of money you have that determines whether you can win. It's message, it's organization, it's a lot of luck. It's like hunting or fishing. You hunt and fish, but you don't always get your game. You have to be in the game, though. You have to be in the woods to succeed in your pursuit of a deer or animal. You have to be in the water to catch a fish. So you have to be running for office and trying to articulate the views that you believe are going to resonate with the people and that you uphold yourself. I was impressed by the way, at the extent to which people looked at authenticity in the 2010 election cycle, not just here in New Hampshire, but across the country. People know we're in a crisis, and they don't want to send people to Washington or to Concord who don't really know what they believe and don't stand on principles that at least they can articulate in advance. And so I was encouraged by the fact that with a little bit of money, we were able to get the message out and receive the kind of support we did. And I still think in New Hampshire, it's not the amount of money you have or spend, it's the message you deliver and the ability to present yourself in a way that resonates with the people. Mm-hmm. You know, if you're not willing to run for office and willing to suffer a loss, then you shouldn't be running, because you're not running for the reasons for policy reasons, for reasons of advancing and speaking for people's interests. You're running because you just want to win the game. And that's, of course you want to win, but you need to run for a reason, for a purpose.
Yeah, just because you want to be governor is really not good enough.
That's correct, Gary. That's exactly right. Yeah. It's not about holding the office. It's about serving the people in a particular way. And I think, so people have asked me, all right, so you ran for U.S. Senate last time, and now you're running for governor. You were ready to run for governor against John Lynch, which I was. We were getting organized long before he announced that he would not seek re-election. In fact, the irony was I'd planned to announce on September 19th, which was the date set for the Bedford Republican Committee meeting in Bedford. I was told the chairman confidentially what I intended to do that day. He knew that for several weeks. We were planning our website rollout, recruiting volunteers who'd be willing to be public with me. And the Thursday before that September 19th announcement, the governor announced he wouldn't seek re-election, which surprised me. I mean, it surprised a lot of people. I think most people felt that Governor Lynch was very popular in a presidential election year would run for re-election and for a fifth term.
Right.
So I was surprised, as a lot of people were, but just because the political landscape changed didn't mean my strategy was going to change. We were ready to move forward and to speak to the people of New Hampshire on the 19th, and I did go forward and announce. And people have asked me...
So you will go on record as saying that Governor Lynch decided not to run again because he knew he was outclassed by you?
No, I would not say that.
You scared him
at all.
He scared him. He's just
you
humble
didn't
to
get
say that.
You didn't get Al Baldessaro to go intimidate him. Did you?
I don't think he did. No,
Stare at him
sure
angrily. Yes.
Stare at him angrily.
Yeah,
Yes.
no, that didn't happen. And you know, so in any event, people have asked me, well, why do you want to run for governor since you ran for the U.S. Senate? And I say it's the other side of the same coin, the federalism coin. Mm-hmm. The idea that we need to shrink the size of government in Washington means not only do you send people to Washington who want to vote for a balanced budget, who want to, not continue the programs that are beyond the Constitution, like the U.S. Department of Education. You need to send those people to Washington. But you also need to have governors and leaders at the state level who are ready to say, you know what, Washington, we don't want you trying to tell us how to run our schools, teach our kids, heal the sick in our state through our health care system, or run our businesses. And Washington is doing that across the board in ways that are very pervasive. And people are starting to become aware of how pervasive it is for our state to have this, great involvement by Washington where it doesn't belong. And we can't afford it. We're killing our future. We're killing our country by putting us into a debt position our children will never be able to pay. They shouldn't be asked to pay in the first place. We're not going to pay for this debt now. We'll be lucky if we really start to put ourselves in balance. But we need people at the governmental level in Concord and across the country, in Boston and Beacon Hill, who are willing to say to the federal government, no more encroachment on what we should be doing. Do what you're supposed to do under the four corners of the Constitution. Defend our borders. Defend our country. Make sure we have interstate commerce that's robust. But let us, as the states, decide how we educate our children, how we develop our internal transportation system, how we treat our citizens in terms of health care, how we regulate our businesses. Where does Washington get off thinking that it knows best? I don't think they know best. In fact, I know they don't know best, and we can get into some of that going down the road. So I'm running for governor so I can continue to work to, I think, renew the New Hampshire advantage, which I think is allowed to get a little rust there, Gary, right? We haven't been promoting New Hampshire like we should be. We've allowed bureaucracy in New Hampshire to get out of control. I'm running for governor to push back on the federal government, to give us more autonomy in New Hampshire, and I want to create a new environment in New Hampshire that's attractive for businesses to stay here, to grow here, to locate here, for families to raise children here, and to have a wonderful quality of life, but one that gives some security for the future. And there's a lot of work that we need to do. If you look at the way we run our state government, a lot of the systems we have in place are very antiquated. Our budgeting process dates back to right after the Great Depression. We asked our commissioners and our departments to develop what are called maintenance budgets. And so it assumes that you're going to continue to do what you just did the last 2 years, or maybe the last 20 years.
Right.
Rather than saying a zero-based budget which says, what do you think you need to do to deliver services to the people
Yeah.
in the areas of your expertise, if it's insurance or banking or education. Now, reconstruct this, and then
Right.
look at a checklist of things like, are there any unfunded mandates that your programs are really passing on to the communities? Because we shouldn't be doing that.
Right.
Are there federal government programs that we've been participating in that have built-in costs to us?
Yeah.
And there are
That maybe we should opt out of.
exactly that we shouldn't be taking that federal money because it costs us more money than it would cost us if we did it ourselves. The federal government is asking us to do things in ways that we wouldn't do ourselves. It becomes inefficient and it becomes controlled by Washington, and it's a real issue. I remember.
I can give you a practical example of what you're saying was in towns. If you look at President Obama saying we need to spend more money on teachers, we need to spend more
Correct.
money on police, what he's really saying is we want to take more tax money and spend it, more tax money, more from the income tax and everything else, to spend it on these programs that will perpetuate government. Because what happens is the government will say, look, we're going to help you hire a police officer, and we'll pay for it for the first year. But after that, you
Right.
have to agree to keep them on forever.
That's correct.
So that you've got a small town that might not even need a new police officer, but they see, we get a free police officer.
Right.
They take him in, but then they're stuck with the bill. The taxpayers are stuck with the bill forever.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of thing that you're talking about.
Right.
And it's relentless at the state level.
It's short-term money oftentimes for a long-term obligation that we wouldn't ordinarily assume for ourselves.
Yeah.
The knee-jerk reaction by people over the last, I'd say, 40 years, 50 years, since the Great Society of Lyndon Johnson in the late 60s, mid-60s to the late 60s, is if there's a federal program, we want to participate. We want our money back. We want this, it's the government bribing us with our own money,
Yeah.
frankly. And so Washington comes up with some grand idea about what we should be doing, and so it dangles some money out there to the people of New Hampshire, and so good intentioned people say we need to grab that federal money.
Right.
Well, no, we don't. If it costs us more down the road, if it costs us to do, or forces us to do things that we wouldn't ordinarily do
Yeah.
in a way that we wouldn't ordinarily do them. The example that I like to use is one that I know very well. When I was chairman of the State Board of Education, and this is in the mid-'90s, 15, 16 years ago, I remember asking our Commissioner of Education at the time, her name was Betty Toomey, I said to her, isn't it possible to take some of our 300-plus employees in the Department of Education and deploy them in the field? Send them to school districts or schools that are having trouble in terms of helping them develop better curriculum for their teachers, teacher training, looking at their systems. Maybe IT systems need to be enhanced for the education of the children. And she looked at me and she said, Ovid, are you kidding? Do you know what this Department of Education is? I said, no. And Betty Toomey is not a conservative, far from it. She said, our Department of Education is a federal outpost. I said, a federal outpost? What do you mean by that? She said, every one of these employees, other than the few of us, the commissioner and deputy commissioner, have jobs that are paid in whole or in part by the federal government through federal program grants.
Okay.
And they're responsible for doing the government's work, the federal government's work. They're not free to be deployed in different ways. You can't just come in here and tell Mary Sue or John Doe, stop doing program X, Y, and Z, and go into the schools and help the schools that are needy. It shocked me the extent, and I started looking into this, and she was absolutely right. Because over the years, again, We've taken more federal money, more federal grants, and we've allowed our whole system to be now designed by Washington. A system that was organized initially by New Hampshire people back after World War I. Our existing educational system dates to that time, when New Hampshire citizens were sent to World War I and deployed in the Army, and they started to meet other folks from around the country. And this is, we have to think about it, when even in the Civil War, you didn't have that kind of level of interaction with people from other parts of the country,
Right.
and let alone go to a foreign land, go to Europe, and meet people in Europe. We learned that our citizens were not well educated.
Yeah.
They didn't read as well. They didn't have any the science skills that other nations students had. Or
We can-
yep, sure,
Yeah,
we can take a call.
Hi, welcome to Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. Who's on the line?
Don.
Hi, Don. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. My thing is, we got all these immigrants coming in, and we're having companies hire these immigrants because they're getting paid by the government to hire these guys.
Okay.
Would
You have a
would
question?
Yeah, my question is, if we're going to create more jobs for our people, these people that are making money in our companies, it just seems to me that, you know, if you're working for the same company, the company's going to work the hell out of you because you're not getting any money out of the government. They got to pay you every dime that you're earning. Some guy that comes in from Pakistan gets money from the government to the company for hiring him. So he doesn't have to produce 100%. 50, 60% is fine, but the guy that's working there, that's been there for 15 years, he's going to push it out at 90, 100% all the time.
Don.
Don, is this from personal experience? Because I've never heard of that.
Yeah.
Yes, yes it is.
What company? No, you probably don't want to tell me that.
But what
I don't
business?
want to tell you that because
Yeah, I know.
it's
I
gonna
know. That's fine. I understand.
but they moved out of the city to another neighboring town.
But anyway,
That's
Don, I think that's what Ovid is basically talking about. Is the fundamentally the federal government has assumed responsibility for all kinds of things that are not in the Constitution.
Correct.
In fact, the Constitution says anything not strictly delegated by this Constitution, by definition, belongs to the states and/or the people themselves. But the federal government has so far overreached that. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, that's one of the reasons why you have people occupying Wall Street and the 500,000 of us that showed up on September 12th down in D.C. in '09 to complain to the people in D.C. because they are so profoundly overreached what their intention is that they have extra money for crap like what you're talking about. Because you're right. Because that basically prevents somebody who's, you know, a regular schmo who grew up here the advantage of getting hired, because they're going to hire somebody else that they're going to get paid to work
And
there.
these are union shops. And these are union shops that they're working in.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to, you know, presume that the Obama administration has anything to do with that. But anyway,
No,
thank you for the call.
You look, we have immigrants that are coming in the city, but yet Nashua gets the money, and they don't have as many immigrants as we do coming into this city,
Yeah.
and we don't get the money.
No.
You want to see a line of them on Saturday? Go down to Maple Street, across from the club, in the ice arena parking lot at 9:30, and you'll see 200 to 300 of them every week that's been there for years, getting their load, and they're the same guys that go to various churches during the city and swap their stuff.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the call, but I think we're pretty much in agreement that the federal government has no right to do that to begin with.
You're absolutely right.
Thank you, Don.
Thanks, Don.
I know in my freshman year as a legislator, I didn't realize how significant that issue was, and this isn't rise to the level of federal education, but it's indicative of what's going on. And that was on the Fish and Game Committee. They had a legislation that they were told they had to introduce to require Social Security numbers on the Fish and Game license. And I'm looking, I said, what? They said, yeah, the federal government said we have to do this. Really? Yeah. Well, if you don't do this, you're going to lose money for for the Fish and Game Department. Why, that is so
Right.
beyond the pale.
Right.
I mean, I know last term I fought. The federal government said that if you don't impose a state saltwater fishing license, the federal government was going to do it for you.
Yeah.
I got up on the House floor and said the federal government has the right to regulate commerce. Me fishing with my grandson off a pier in Portsmouth is not commerce.
Right.
This has nothing to do with the federal
It's
government. They have no right to
an
fight
overreach,
to,
yeah.
to impose that. Not only that, we need people like you as governor to tell the federal government to pound sand. We need somebody like, I got a legislation in this year to have our Attorney General's position become an elected one.
Right.
Because then he would be accountable to the people, as opposed to sitting on his duff and saying, "Oh, I don't want," they don't want to get involved in anything. The best I can tell.
Well, one of the
Probably don't want to comment on that.
No, but I do want to go back to this the point I was trying to make earlier. But well, since we're there, I mean, people ask me, what's one of the first things you'll do as governor? I'll tell you, one of the first things I'll do as governor is direct the Attorney General to join the lawsuits of other states against Obamacare. That is one of the greatest threats to our economic viability in New Hampshire
Yeah.
if we allow Washington to take over our healthcare system, which is what Obamacare is about. And the fact that we have not done that, the legislature tried to compel the Attorney General to do it. He's an executive branch member, so it's probably not within the purview of the legislature, and the Supreme Court has ruled that. But it would be my purview, and I'll tell you what, if he doesn't do it, I'll do it myself as the
Yeah.
governor of the state. And under the Constitution, I have the right to bring a suit in my name on behalf of the people of the state of New Hampshire, and I'll do it because I feel so strongly about this. I practice law in healthcare. I know the overreach of the government in that area, and it's going to be terrible if Obamacare is implemented and leads to a one-size-fits-all, insurance program, which is not going to be an insurance program. It's going to be a healthcare socialized medicine program. And so the individual mandate, I think, is the most vulnerable piece of that. But there are a lot of other parts of the law that we should be challenging, and we should be part of the sort of the states' rights movement to say to the federal government, get out of health care, at least to the extent you're trying to get into it now.
Right.
To come back to the point I was making earlier, though, our educational system, such as it is in New Hampshire, was designed by New Hampshire people back after World War I because they were trying to meet a need that they identified, which was an inadequate system at the time, based on the results we saw. Washington didn't compel that. No more did Washington compel us to put a hospital in Lebanon or Hanover called Mary Hitchcock, or Elliott Hospital on the east side of Manchester as opposed to Catholic Medical Center on the west side or Concord Hospital. It was done organically. It was done by the people living in their communities who said at the time, turn of the century, the 18th and 19th century, and then beyond, we want a hospital in our area. So they cobbled the resources, founded hospitals, recruited doctors. They did it organically. Nobody designed it from a governmental perspective. So now what? Government decides that it's going to take over the system that we have? No, you want people to be invested locally, like with
Exactly.
education.
Yeah.
That's the secret. Local control is the secret to the New Hampshire advantage. And we have created a system in the past that has allowed and affirmed that local control. But over the last 15 years, under the misguided leadership of some of our leaders, we've allowed New Hampshire to become part of the national takeover, if you will, of some of these programs, instead of fighting against it and trying to opt out and get waivers and send people to Washington. We're going to redesign the system that's growing out there.
Right.
That's a very important concept, a very important approach, and I'm going to take that approach on behalf of the people of New Hampshire. When I was running for U.S. Senate, little anecdotal story. This woman met me at a store. I was doing some campaigning. The owner said, "You sure you can meet some of my customers?" And she came up to me and she said, "You're over at Lamontagne." I said, "I am." She said, I followed your career. In the 1990s, I remember you said we should abolish the U.S. Department of Education." I said, "I did." She said, "You still believe that?" I said, "I do." She said, "I thought you were nuts then. Now I know you're right." She says, after 15 years watching what's going on, there's no question they shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah.
So
Elizabeth is calling, and then after that, I have a question that came in
sure.
via text after that. So, hi, Elizabeth.
Hi, guys. How are you?
All right.
great, Elizabeth.
Good. I just wanted to call in and tell Ovid that I'm very impressed. I think you're well-spoken, and I very much like your ideology. and I wish you luck, and I wish I were still back there in New Hampshire.
You have to come back, that's all.
Yeah, you're just going to have to come back.
I'd love to have your help, Elizabeth. You must know people on the internet you can send our way. That'd be great. I should indicate to you, in case you want to visit our website, it's Friends of Ovid 2012. You can access it by just typing in Ovid, O-V-I-D-E. Don't forget the E.
Yes.
2012.com. And it's the toughest name in politics, Elizabeth, but it builds character, guaranteed. And it puts.
Well, I absolutely will. I absolutely. Now, where does the name come from? I have to ask you.
Well, I thank you for asking that. It's my great-grandfather's name. He was legally immigrated to New Hampshire back in the middle 1800s. He purchased.
I love that you clarified that.
Thank you. And he actually purchased the family farm in 1891 in Rochester. It's still in our family. My aunt lives there on Crown Point Road. And my grandfather was born. He was the youngest of six kids. He was the only boy, and his father, my great grandfather, gave him the name, and for whatever reason, he gave that name to my dad. And when I was born, my mother thought she was going to name me Mark. And my father looked at me in the nursery and he said, "Well, you can call him Mark, but I'm calling him Ovid." Thanks a lot, Dad. And so I've had the name since. We have different middle names, so I'm not the
It's
fourth.
better than Sue.
But it is.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
You know what's interesting? Elizabeth will appreciate this. In 19...
It's okay. I've managed to avoid my family name, and I did not get the name Sybil.
Okay.
Sybil.
I dodged that bullet. I'm lucky.
When I ran for governor in 1996, there was a sign. My sign said Lamontagne for governor, and a number of people said to me when they went to vote, they looked for my name, but they said, "What was that name?" And they couldn't understand the name in front of it.
Oh, no.
It kind of threw them
Yeah.
off. And I said, "You didn't know my first name." They said, "No, I always thought of you as Lamontagne." So I decided, you know what, this time we'll use the name Ovid and keep it simple, use the first name and brand it that way. And,
Right.
And so I'm going to go with that brand in the governor's race. And so Lamontagne will be on
Very
the sign,
nice.
but it'll be very small. It'll be Ovid
Yeah,
for
yeah.
governor.
Well, it's memorable, and it is a good way to brand yourself, and I do. I wish you luck, and I agree with what you said so far, and as Gary and Matt know, that's a rare thing.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth.
All right, have a good night.
Happy,
guys.
happy
care, young
Thanksgiving.
lady.
All right, Elizabeth,
Happy
thank you.
All right, love you all. Bye.
Bye-bye.
I wanted to, you've been touching a lot about the Constitution. One part of the Constitution that doesn't get much press is Article 6 of the New Hampshire Constitution. Because, like I was telling Ovid before the show, and he already knows this, but in New Hampshire, if you're a legislator, a senator, a House governor, council, you have to swear to uphold the Constitution.
Right.
You don't swear to support the Republican Party. You don't swear to make sure your friends get nice appointments.
Correct.
You swear to uphold the Constitution of the United States.
Right, right. Hi, welcome to Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. Who's on the line?
Eddie, I just got a quick question for you guys.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Hello?
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I just got a couple of quick questions for Ovid.
Yeah.
If I understand it correctly, Ovid, this is your, fourth run for higher office?
It'll be my fourth run. That's correct.
All right. I want to cast an informed vote in November, and I think it's very important when someone's running for office that you get an idea of what their background is. Have you ever held elective office before?
No, I have not. I've
right.
held appointed office. I was chairman of the State Board of Education here in New Hampshire from 1993 to 1996 through the middle
All right.
of
Not
96.
having held elective office is not necessarily a bad thing.
I agree.
Yeah.
Do you come to the people and say, kind of like Herman Cain, hey, I'm a businessman, and that's what I bring to the table? I mean, I know what your values are, but what is your background? Do you have a strong business background?
Actually, thank you for asking that. I do, and the difference between me as a candidate now in 2000 and well, it'll be 2012 and 1996 is I came from an education perspective in 1996. I'd been, state legal counsel to the state senate, chairman of the State Board of Education. My focus was in legislation and administration of education. Since that time, I've served as chairman of St. Mary's Bank. It's the first credit union in the country, founded right here in New Hampshire. I've learned a lot about the financial markets. For small business, That's a very important part of our economic fabric,
Right.
which I did not have before that experience. I'm counsel to a hospital in town. I've learned a lot about healthcare. I've been a director of a law firm, which is a fairly substantial firm, Divine Willamette and Branch. We employ about 200 people. I've had to deal with the issues of hiring and firing and taxes and everything that a business person would deal with. And I've consulted and been advisor to a number of companies who've had problems, and some of them who've been upstarts or startups, and also upstarts in terms of some of the characters that you're honored to work with. And so I've had a lot of experience in the business community, and not only that, but I've worked with the business community in terms of some of the organizations that are out there advancing what I think are good sound practices, whether it's the BIA, the Manchester Chamber of Commerce, the New England Council. Those folks know me. I can work with them, and I will work with them going forward. And I think I have the strongest relationship of any candidate in recent memory with the fabric of New Hampshire in a number of levels. So I thank you for the opportunity to talk about that.
All right, well, good luck with your campaign. Take care.
I hope I can earn your
Thank you.
support.
Thank you.
Yeah,
That's
and he raised the question about having run before. When you look at the history of some other candidates, I mean, John Sununu, for example, the governor, ran 3 other times before he won for governor.
Oh, yeah, that's always
And that's the way it is in New
case.
Hampshire. And people, you don't run for office because it's fun. You run for office because you're passionate about something. It is. I enjoy meeting people, but it's a lot of work. And you have to be convinced that you are running for a certain objective.
Right.
And it isn't holding office. That, if I had an ego before, it is definitely in check now. Because losing is not fun. I don't
Right.
want to lose. I'm not going to lose.
Yeah.
But it's important that you're motivated by principles, by a value set that you hope the people of New Hampshire, the voters you're appealing to, will resonate with and want to support.
Right.
And somebody was also mentioning, I think before we had the call, I'm not going to be a Republican governor. I'm going to be a governor who comes from the Republican perspective, on the Republican platform and its values. But I subscribe to the view that if you're an elected official, when you go into the State House, you leave your party label at the door.
Right.
You go in and become the people's representative, and in my case, the people's governor, especially because management is part of the responsibility of the governor in terms of heading up the executive branch.
Yeah.
The legislative branch is about enacting laws and passing laws that hopefully are expressing the policy wishes of the people. But the governor is the executive, the chief executive officer of the state. That person needs to work with everyone, not
Yeah.
just Republicans. And you may have a value set, clearly, and I will have a value set, but I also want to be able to work with everyone and have a place at the table for anyone who has a view that I need to consider. And I think that's most people in New Hampshire.
Absolutely.
One of the things I wanted to talk about was the Constitution, because that's basically a lot of what we talk
Yes,
about on this
right.
in the show, is the Constitution. And we're running out of time, so I want to cover. It always does. It goes wicked
Yeah.
quick.
Yeah.
And people that are on the show, I'm going to hit them with the Constitution because, like I say, you swear to uphold the Constitution.
Right.
You know, if I become governor or something, I don't. Because I become governor, my first priority isn't to make sure Mike Connington has a a position in something or anything else.
Oh, it should be.
It should be. If I was governor, it would.
Yes, yes.
I'm not running for governor.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's see. I can't read this.
So you're talking about Article 1,
No. Nope.
Part 1, Article
No.
6?
No.
No, okay.
No. I was. Now I'm talking about something else. I move along pretty
Okay.
quick.
As you're doing that, can I interject?
No.
Okay.
Just a second.
Haha.
This takes me.
You thought you were going to come on here and interject.
Yeah. Or conduct an interview of the Honorable Gary.
Yeah,
That's
right.
proper.
Okay, Article 38, social virtues inculcate? Here, you got
Inculcate.
Inculcated?
Inculcated, yes.
Inculcated, that's a good word. I didn't look that one
Oh,
up.
it's 4 syllables right
Yeah,
there.
it's 4 syllables, so that's why I'm only a state rep. I don't have to actually know more than 3-syllable words. My eyes are bad, so bear with me. A frequent recurrence of the fundamental principles of the Constitution and the constant adherence to justice, moderation, temperance, industry, frugality, and all other social virtues are indispensable and necessary to preserve the blessings of liberty and good government. The people ought therefore to have the particular regard to those principles in the choice of their officers. Now, I looked up virtue. I got a connection on my computer to a 1828 dictionary, and it's funny, virtue. I looked up virtue because it says social virtue, and it under Roman times virtue was virility. That's where the word virility comes from. And so virtuous was somebody who was strong and really good at battle. But in current word, in 1928, what it really meant is somebody who was basically a moral, upstanding person. And I think if you look at what's going on with the Tea Party movement,
Yes.
and you go on look at what's happening in the Occupy Wall Street movement, all of them fundamentally boil down to the fact that we are not electing people of virtue,
Yes.
of people who have a moral underpinning, and that's why they're running, and that's why they want to be in office. Because right now, what you end up with people in Washington, D.C., who have obtained so much power, like you said, because they've taken away states' rights, and the states haven't fought back. They have so much power that they give these special deals to people on Wall Street. They give deals to these people, those people.
Yeah.
Those people give them money. They can afford to run for office, and
They're all bought.
They're all bought.
Yeah.
And the fundamental thing is you need people with basic morality to be in these positions, a fundamental morality. It's the immorality that has led us to the point at which we are. And I believe if we don't put that in check, I believe the government is in very great danger of becoming socialistic, which is much worse than capitalistic.
Well, the Founding Fathers actually identified that it was critical that we elect people, and the people themselves needed to be people of virtue, people who had discipline, self-discipline, who had good habits and so forth, and were educated. And if they were not, you couldn't govern yourself, and you certainly weren't going to elect people among you who would be people of virtue, who would be good leaders. So we need to continue to understand that, first of all, we are the people from which government derives its power. It comes from us. It's our responsibility to keep government in check. It's our responsibility to have the relationship with our elected officials on a constant basis to make sure they're doing the job that we've asked them to do pursuant to the Constitution. Now, you and I did not have a conversation to prepare for this interview today, did we?
No.
Okay. So I want to show you what I carry with me.
What I should have? We should have?
No.
I screwed up again?
Gary.
But I want to just show you, to your point.
I try so hard to explain.
I agree with what Gary was saying very much, that an elected official is duty-bound to uphold the Constitution. When I ran for the United States Senate, I was carrying the United States Constitution around, and I have that. But what I'm also carrying with me is the New Hampshire Constitution
He
in
gets
a pocket
one.
size.
See, you just get the regular one. He
Was
gets the
and-
good one.
With someone else's name on it.
Yeah. I gave him
Right.
the Constitution today. It's actually got one of my seatmates.
Okay,
is,
so you borrowed it.
Amy Perkins. No,
Right.
I ripped it off. Anyway.
But this is a very important document, and it's important that elected officials read it, understand it. I'm studying it. I'm studying the history of the Constitution again, the New Hampshire Constitution, so I can have a better understanding about what it really will mean to serve as the governor within the four corners of the Constitution. I think it's critically important that people don't just blindly swear an oath to uphold the Constitution if they don't know it. And
Yep.
so that's why I carry the Constitution with me, and to field some of these questions too that come up. Now, I think I'm going to suggest to you that I think that what you just read from is from Part 1. And
Yeah.
what is that
No,
section
wait.
again?
Is it part one?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Part 1.
No, not 38.
What
It's
section?
a separate
38?
section.
Yeah, 38 says.
Article 38. I think it's a separate section.
Okay, let me look at that.
Just look for inculcated. That should just jump
that's
right
right.
out.
That should just
Yeah,
jump right out.
Inculcated. Words that I have to look up after this show. Inculcated.
By the way, while you guys are doing
Yeah,
that, we
that's
do have
Part 1. Part 1 is Part 1, Section 38 is social virtues inculcated. But can I share with you? No, go ahead. You're the
go-
ones
no.
asking questions. so let me
No.
do that.
Go ahead, share.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say that to your point too.
You're going to talk about
The-
Article 6?
I'm going to go to Part 2, Article 83, which is the educational section of the Constitution.
Yeah.
Because it really is a beautifully written section, and it's been distorted by our Supreme Court, sadly. But what it does say,
Encouraging literature
yes,
and
that's what it.
control. Here, you can read that. That'd be
I've
easier
got it
to see
right
for
here.
you.
But in addition to saying that it shall be the duty of the legislators and magistrates in all future periods of this government to cherish the interest of literature and the sciences in all seminaries and all in public schools, but this is what's really important, to encourage private and public institutions, rewards and immunities for the promotion of agriculture, arts, sciences, commerce, trades, and then to countenance and inculcate the principles of humanity and general benevolence, public and private charity, industry and economy, honesty and punctuality, sincerity, sobriety, and all social affections and generous
yeah.
sentiments among the people.
Sobriety, I don't know what that should be in here.
I know.
But that's what our Constitution
It does,
requires.
yes.
We have an affirmative mandate that our schools should also involve character education to help our young men and women to be people of virtue and
Yeah.
character. And it's a wonderful statement. It's not just an historical document. This is one that's supposed to govern how we, and supposed to direct us and as elected officials about how we govern. the
That's
state
exactly
government.
right, because if you look at Article 6 of the New Hampshire Constitution, it says, morality and piety. Sorry.
It's okay.
That's right, I can read
got
it.
glaucoma, that's okay. As morality and piety rightly grounded on high principles will give the best and greatest security for government. That's in the Constitution. People
Right.
think there's a separation of church and state. Morality and piety. Piety is a reverence for family and God. So they're saying right in the Article 6 of the New Hampshire Constitution that it is absolutely necessary that people have a regard for God and for family and piety. It's all throughout the Constitution.
And you know what's beautiful about Part 1 is that it's our statement of our Bill of Rights in New Hampshire. And our Bill of Rights is also an important document to look at. And so Part 1 in this particular section or Article 6 talks about our rights as people to be faithful, to live a pious life, to engage in the activities that we are endowed with in terms of the rights that we're endowed with
And
by our Creator.
I
And it's
think
a
if
wonderful
we go
statement.
back to the article, the Occupy Wall Street and the Tea Party movement, the people that are really to blame for what's going on in D.C. on Wall Street are the people themselves.
Yes.
Because they're uneducated, they're not uneducated, they're probably very educated as far as technically as far as their job, but as far as history, as far as the Constitution, as far as electing people of morality and good character, they have failed miserably, and you get these dirtbags that go up to Washington, D.C. and line their pockets.
you
But I don't have any strong opinion about that, but...
But is it that we elect? I have a theory. I'd like to believe that at least most of the people that we send to Washington, when we initially send them, probably are good, well-meaning people. But then they get caught up in the system. I think the system is fundamentally corrupt.
No, I don't agree with
You
that.
don't-
No. Because if you're a person of good character, you are not corrupted by it. That's basically what character is the
Right.
ability to withstand. It's like in the New Hampshire legislature, we have people that are crying because the speaker has tried to talk them out of things. The Concord Monitor calls me and said, because you probably disagree with me, but I vote against right to work every 2 years.
You do.
Oh, yeah. And the Concord Monitor says, well, has leadership tried to talk you out of that? I said, well, yeah, it's politics.
Right,
What
right.
do you expect? Of course.
Yeah.
But if you have no character, you can't withstand that.
Right.
So we're not electing people who have any moral fiber or any moral background and so they can go up there and easily be corrupted,
Yeah.
but they shouldn't be up there to begin with.
I guess I wouldn't want to paint with too broad a brush, though. I think a lot of people, to Matt's point, go to Washington. They're well-intentioned. They get caught up in the system that isn't an individual system. You know how it is in the legislature. You have to work with other people to come to a coalition view, at least enough to win up to pass a bill. So people are cutting deals with each other, and they're working with lobbyists, and they get caught up in that system, and they sort of lose their orientation. They're still good people, but they're caught up in a system that they can't control and they can't manage well. So we need to make sure we send people of character, people who have values and principles that they're going to live with. That's why in New Hampshire, the most important thing you have in Concord is your word. This is the New Hampshire way. People need to count on each other. You're paid $100, Honorable Gary Hopper, for being a state representative. there isn't much cash to go
I earn
around
every
in the
penny
state.
of it, too, by
And
the way.
I know you earn more than that, but you're only paid $100. So what is left? What's left is people go to Concord to try to make a difference for their citizens who elected them, and they need to count on their word. Your word is your bond in New Hampshire, and when you make a pledge or commitment to do something or not do something, you've got to own up to that, because otherwise you're not going to be effective in being a leader. Moral authority really makes a big difference in Concord. And I saw it firsthand when I was Senate Legal Counsel. I dealt with it as a chairman of the state board, and we were working with legislators and trying to pass charter school legislation, supporting homeschools and all, homeschooling. You have to be a person of your word.
Yeah.
And your word is everything in New Hampshire.
We got about 3 minutes.
Yeah, I know we got 3 minutes.
Okay. I
I
wasn't
saw
sure.
the sign said 3 minutes.
Oh, you did? Nice. That's right.
All right, let's a quick one. I'll see if you can get through this quickly. One of the fundamental rights in the New Hampshire Constitution is to be secure in your possessions and your in your person and everything else. What's your feeling about the
Oops. Were you thinking of Senate Bill 88?
Yes, please.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Well, that's the expansion of the Castle Doctrine that would basically allow you to defend yourself wherever you are, not necessarily in your home. And I think I supported that bill, and the reason I do is because I put my faith in people first. And the presumption prior to the passage of that bill was that you had an obligation to flee.
Right.
You didn't have the right to exercise your judgment, to stand your ground, to defend yourself and the people around you. And I put my faith in people. Yes, there are going to be situations that aren't going to work out.
Sure.
People are going to overreact perhaps, but I believe the presumption should be in favor of the people
Yeah.
to do what's best for themselves under the circumstances. And the burden shouldn't be on us to flee.
Right,
And
I
that's what it
agree.
was under the prior law.
Yeah.
So thank you to the legislature for reversing the veto of Governor Lynch on this particular bill. It's an important freedom bill. It's a freedom that we ought to cherish and honor in New Hampshire, and I supported the passage on the override of the veto.
Now, what do you think if, say, somebody like Representative Al Baldessaro stares at somebody, they have the right to defend themselves?
Well, he doesn't
Well-
just stare; he stares angrily.
He stares
Yes.
angrily.
I don't know the circumstances of that. It's unfortunate that
If he were to stare lovingly, that would be different.
all
that would
right.
be
I
okay.
don't think
yeah.
he can. He's a Marine.
Right? Yeah. Probably
they don't
not.
do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up. My dad was a jarhead, and that was something. People say, "Have you ever been in the service?" Well, I kind of grew up in it in a way.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
jump. Dad tells you to jump. You ask him how high while you're in the air. That kind
How
of
high,
thing.
sir?
Yes, how high, sir.
Right.
He was tough.
Well, we have a lot of work to do here in New Hampshire, and I hope that the people of New Hampshire will entrust me with the privilege and the honor and the responsibility to serve as governor after Governor Lynch completes his term. And we can do a lot of good things here in New Hampshire. And I'd simply ask the viewers in the audience to visit friendsofovid2012.com or sign up at ovid2012.com, O-V-I-D-E, don't forget the E, 2012.com, and become part of our team. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook and so forth, but become part of our team and let's work together. And I will say this. A lot of campaigns are run when people put together a great organization, and after the election, they let the organization dissolve. I want to maintain the organization of citizens who will help me win so they can help me serve. People in Colebrook and in Keene and Chesterfield or Salem who are with us, I want them to be my eyes and ears so I can be their advocate and I can have a direct relationship and maintain that relationship. With the internet the way it is, as powerful as it is, there's no reason we can't do that.
Right.
And I want to do that. So I invite people to join us at ovid2012.com.
Thank you very much.
We
I
gotta
know.
wrap.
I know. I just know that earlier this year you were walking through the hall and I asked if you were running for governor. You said, "Are you going to support me?" And I said, "Yes."
Thank you.
And that was in March. So if you have free food,
Lasagna. He likes lasagna.
I like
Yeah.
lasagna.
Yes.
Thank you,
Thank you very much,
All right.
Ovid.
Thank you.
Thanks,
And
Ovid.
good luck.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you very much.
Matt.
Have a good
Happy
Thanksgiving,
Thanksgiving.
everybody.
Thanksgiving.